discussing a presentation by Daniela Rus at Berkeley X symposium I had the chance to attend. And Daniela is actually a very accomplished researcher in the robotics AI space. And she presented her liquid models, amongst other things. And the idea here is that to use differential equations to define neurons and therefore have have learned coefficients within the differential equations, and then use the neural net as a function approximator. And she claims that these networks are a lot more efficient. They have their state space models, so they have this temporal causality. So if this happens, then this happens, and then this happens, and because of this happened, that happens. So they have that, and they're kind of, in that sense, forward-looking, or maybe that's the wrong word, but if you contrast this with the transformer architecture, which is the architecture du jour right now, the difference here is that in the transformer architecture, you have an inference, and at inference, X is being compared, and the maximum likelihood of X belonging to a certain distribution, or basically trying to guess, okay, what is X? What's the context of X? And how should I, the I being the model, how should I react to this X, this input? As opposed to in the liquid network, what Daniela is proposing is a more, it's not a maximum likelihood inference, but it's a lot more a casual, causality-driven inference, temporal causality. So because of this happened, that happened. So they're faster. They require a lot less parameters, a lot less memory, and therefore they're very promising. I mean, these are, of course, this is gold for people's ears, right? If you're in the AI space, particularly in the robotic space, and you hear sentences like less parameters, faster inference, less power, you listen, right? And that's why I think Daniela Rus's idea and concepts are incredibly interesting. I wasn't able to talk to her in person. So in terms of how the technical execution of liquid networks works and things like that, I have to, I'm not sure, to be honest. And I don't want to overstate their, their effectiveness, nor do I want to understate their effectiveness. I just want to let it out there. Maybe if anybody wants to add comments to this, has more knowledge, I'm happy to engage. But at this point, I think what I want to say is that this is an interesting attempt to solve one of the more fundamental problems of AI, which is inference. You can have a lot of knowledge compressed in latent space, and the more knowledge and context you have, the more difficult it could, in principle, become to infer or to do inference, right? Because you constantly have to check your whole space for what's going on. Now there are, of course, approaches like Mamba, for example, out of Stanford, which is a model that statistically sort of eliminates potential sections of the latent space and therefore only searches in the maximum likelihood process where it's most likely to have use. Then there is reinforcement learning, which in my opinion, I don't know where reinforcement learning stands. Is reinforcement learning a state space model? It has this dynamic reactivity in it, but it's not necessarily temporally causal, right? Reinforcement learning is a lot more about navigating the maze and using knowledge to navigate that maze more efficiently. I think the one thing where I find Daniela is a bit, on the weak side is like she's trying to sell her ideas without having concrete examples, or sort of losing. It's like she's a bit like detached from reality, or it sounds almost like a marketing gimmick by a scientist that is trying to be sort of McKinsey style, selling you something I'm not, I don't want to insult her. I mean, she's not, trying to drown us in vacuous PowerPoints. But for example, one lady asked, I mean, aren't you just showing us differential equations here? And she gave a good answer. She said, look, these are not just differential equations. Liquid networks are differential equations defining neurons, and those neurons are adaptive through learning. In other words, the coefficients they get, they change with learning. So there are some real advances here. This is not just something that has been around for 50 years, repackaged and sold as AI. This is real. And after some research, after the talk, I realized that that Daniela's work is actually being used in commercial, in the commercial world. Like for example, Spotify is using it. So this is not so bad. But again, I think you run the risk a little bit when you approach a system like Daniela does. You run the risk of sounding a little bit vacuous. I guess that's where I want to leave it. Now, where does this leave us here at Orange Capital Partners? We are, the purpose of Orange Capital Partners is to invest in fundamentally new concepts, engineering practices with large impact. And we're interested in real-world AI, physical robotics. And we think that models that can do inference faster with better context and less overhead are interesting. That's why we were very happy to attend this lecture. I think Daniela actually works with humanoid robots, which is, of course, a big focus of Orange Capital Partners with a large investment in Tesla. Now, as far as humanoid robots are concerned, I think one of the things that I wasn't really clear about was continuous learning. And in my opinion, that is the most important question going forward. How can we deploy robots in the real world and have them execute tasks and also learn while they're on task from mistakes? This is a really important part of the equation because we just don't have the kind of data to bitter lesson pill robotics unless we can start somewhere and have robots actually execute real world tasks and learn from them. And, of course, the Tesla FSD network and soon robotaxi network is one attempt to do that. So, and it looks like that's kind of also where Daniela's work is circling around. So first, you learn from imitation learning. You learn enough to be able to be deployed as a robot. And then while you're in the wild, you keep learning. And the way you learn is, of course, you need to have, it's like kind of like you need to have a meta model. So you need to, while the robot is executing, for example, cleaning your apartment, you need to have a meta model or a shadow model that makes decisions and contrasts them with the robot's decisions. And then you have to have a way to discriminate which decision is better and then keep learning. And then, of course, the more interesting thing is where Richard Sutton's idea comes in from finding what he calls options or learning skills. So natively in the model, also learn how to develop new skills. So kind of like child's play. Those are the interesting questions. Daniela didn't actually talk about this. After the talk, I did some research talking to Grok about it, and Grok actually believes that Daniela has some continuous learning approaches that are interesting. So this would be definitely something I would like to follow up with her. But fundamentally, I think Daniela's approach is certainly very interesting. I think we need more efficient, more focused models, while at the same time preserving context and common sense and semantic understanding.